Now, the UK and US have agreed on a breakthrough trade deal which promises benefits for UK car makers, steel producers and farmers.
Well, US car export tariffs will drop from 27.5% to 10%, while a 25% tariff on UK steel has been scrapped. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, joins us now from Westminster. Good morning to you. We can obviously see, can't we, some beneficial aspects to this deal, but there are accusations that it's been rushed through and actually it's more beneficial for the US than us.
Well, look, this is the first of what we hope is a number of trading improvements between the UK and the United States. This initial trade deal was crucial for those car production companies, steel, aluminium production, food production in the UK, where we know that the punitive tariffs that were in place beforehand put jobs, thousands of jobs and livelihoods at risk across the United Kingdom, which is why we were absolutely focused on getting this trade deal across the line, the first country to do so with the United States under President Trump's administration, in order to protect those jobs and those livelihoods for people across the country.
But have we made too many compromises to do that? You know, there are accusations, aren't there, that we've been shafted over this, that we're essentially in a worse position than we were a few months ago. We know that the tariffs we were charging the US were 5.1%, now 1.8%. But the US, however, who were charging us 3.4%, it's gone up to 10% now on average. So we seem to be worse off than we were before.
No, we are just factually better off than we were before this trade deal because of the tariffs that President Trump had put in place across the world. We're the first country
than before the tariffs were imposed, though. We're in a worse position than that. We haven't managed to negotiate away the tariffs.
Well, look, would I like a world where there is peace and no tariffs? Of course I would, but that's not the world we live in. The world that we were living in was one where there were a significant number of new tariffs across the global economy. We have protected British jobs and British workers in the car manufacturing, steel, aluminium and farming sectors as a consequence of this trade deal. As I say, the first country in the world to do this deal with the United States. That's good news for those sectors, especially in a week where we've also got the trade deal with India, the fourth cut in interest rates, now lowest they have been for the last 2 years to help people with the cost of living crisis. This is the government delivering and rolling up its sleeves to support British people and British workers and to create a strong economy. But look, do we want to go further? Of course we do. There are more things that we want to negotiate with the United States on other sectors in the economy and with other countries around the world, and that's what we're now going to be working hard to deliver.
Can you explain to us how it will work on things like beef, for example? There are real concerns, aren't there, from people here who are worried about the beef that will be coming over from the US, whether it will be hormone-treated, whether there will be chemicals added, and protections have been talked about. But essentially, we know from what the US said yesterday, they are extremely keen for us to take a lot of their beef, aren't they?
Let me be crystal clear about this. Our food standards have not changed and they will not change and they are not negotiable. So the food standards that we had before this trade deal and, quite frankly, the other trade deals that we've signed up to this week are the same food standards that we have today. We will not be having hormone-treated beef or chlorinated chicken coming into the UK because that is not something that the government supports and it's not something the British people support. And we're holding that line in our negotiations, whether it's with the Americans or with any other country around the world.
Can I ask you about the digital services tax? Is that part of this deal? Are we going to find out what's going on there? Because that was a sort of red line for the Americans and Donald Trump and the White House. But a lot of people here are calling for this tax because it could bring in £800 million a year. What's happening with that?
So the digital services tax, essentially a tax on digital companies selling things in the UK, unlike in comparison to going to the shop and buying it, for example. That was a regime that already existed in the UK. That has not changed as a consequence of this trade deal. So that's exactly the same as it was before. It's not part of this trade deal with the United States, and there's been no change to it.
So are we going to see people like Amazon and these big American companies that are here, are we going to see them paying more tax?
Yes, because of the digital sales tax, which has been in place and continues to be in place.
OK. Can we talk about trade deals? The India trade deal that we announced earlier, that you announced earlier this week, but the following day, India appear to be going to war with their neighbours, Pakistan, with skirmishes and shelling on both sides. I mean, that seems like a bit of a coincidence, that timing. Does that compromise Britain now? Is Britain, because we've got this trade deal with India, are we able to turn round to a country like India and ask them to calm down tensions?
Look, I don't think the two issues are connected. It was great we were able to sign this trade deal with India. It's a huge and growing economy, obviously with very significant ties to the United Kingdom and vice versa. It's the biggest trade deal that the UK has been able to sign up to since we left the European Union, and we're thrilled that we've been able to get that across the line. It's good for the UK economy. On the separate issue of tensions and the fact they're escalating between India and Pakistan, the Foreign Secretary has been in touch with his counterparts in both countries. Evidently, we would rather that that was de-escalated and that there was not further conflict in the world. And through our Foreign Office and our Foreign Secretary, we'll continue to try to support both sides to return to a more peaceful situation.
But is Britain's position compromised? I mean, can we turn round to Pakistan and India and say, we want you to bring down tensions and stop this further conflict? Where only yesterday, Agnes Callamard, she's the head of Amnesty, has accused governments like the UK governments of not using their degree of influence and keep tiptoeing around the reality in Gaza. And she refers to what's happening there as a genocide. So how can the UK have any power over Pakistan and India? Say, hey, listen, can you stop sending these bombs across the border when we are selling arms to Israel, who are accused by some very serious organisations of a genocide?
Quite a few complicated issues in your question there. I mean, the first point is, can the UK tell any country around the world what to do? Of course not. We have diplomats through the diplomatic channels where we try to support peace and cooperation and living by the rules-based order, as you would expect. I think you asked me if there was a conflict between what's going on between India and Pakistan and in Israel and Gaza, and you asked me about arms exports. You know that we have restricted arms exports to Israel where there has been evidence of those weapons being used in breach of the conditions.
Well, the government are in court for this next week, aren't they? They are facing a court trial next week, accused of selling arms to Israel when Israel is accused of war crimes.
Sure, and obviously as a minister I can't provide a running commentary on court process because it's independent of government, so it'd be wrong for me to do so. Okay. But essentially the root of your question is, does our trading relationships conflict with what's going on in the world? They don't, as long as those trading relationships are on the basis of the values and the rules-based order that we sign up to.
It was more to the point, does our conflict, our involvement in the conflict in Israel and Gaza affect our position? You say about a rules-based order. Are we dismantling that rules-based order when it comes then to advising, whether it's through diplomats, India and Pakistan?
Yeah, I don't think I agree with the premise of the question. And it's important that we can continue to trade with countries like India, like America. These are important allies, important partners, including with European counterparts, where we're negotiating improvements to our trading relationship as well. And look, this is just an example of the UK government pulling out all the stops to try to support British business and British workers to get the best deal for our economy here at home, but to also create good, well-paid jobs in the UK for the things that we can sell abroad. And that's why we're doing everything we can in, yes, a very difficult world where there is lots going on, to try to protect the livelihoods of British workers, create great opportunities for our kids, and make sure that the British economy is as strong and resilient as it can be in the face of a very challenging world.
Just finally, can I ask you about this Labour backbench rebellion? Because more than 40 Labour MPs have now written a letter to protest about the welfare cuts, saying that they are impossible to support, the planned cuts to disability benefits. I mean, it's not a great look, is it? Isn't the Prime Minister going to have to listen over this one?
Well, look, it's important that MPs represent their constituents. We are all first and foremost constituency MPs, and that's why, as members of Parliament, irrespective of which party's in government, you'll be part of discussions around changes to policy and legislation. On welfare specifically, our starting principles are the right ones, which is that if people need support, we will make sure they have it. But for people who can and want to get back into work, we're going to put in the mechanisms to help them to do so. The bill in question is not published yet. I'm sure it will be shortly. And in the normal way, the government will work with members of Parliament in Parliament to reassure them, to listen to them, to look at the drafting of those details as the bill passes through the House.
OK. Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, thanks for joining us this morning.